I saw this video for my deal and I want to watch it, so let's get into it.
This video is sponsored by World of Warships. More about them in a little bit. Pregnancy, war, MMORPGs. What do these all have in common?
What do those all have in common? Pregnancy, war, and MMORPGs. I don't know. Bad decisions.
They all require multiple people. But if MMORPG multiplayer, why play MMORPG alone? This is a question philosophers dating back to ancient Greece have thought about for centuries and even years.
I play MMOs alone because I don't sync up with other people very well, right? Like, in order to play MMOs with other people, you tend to have to be at the same skill level as them and also have the same schedule that they do. And then you also have to like them. And then also they have to like you. And then also you guys have to be able to agree on what content you want to do in that MMO. And then also you guys have to be, within a certain lifestyle of each other. There's just a lot of things. So you just play alone. You just play alone all the time because I play at the weirdest hours and I don't play as a job.
And today, the topic of playing MMOs solo is still a big point of...
It's huge. It's one of the biggest things. I mean, Final Fantasy XIV famously has the ability to go through most of the dungeons in the game with an NPC party. And I did that with a lot of the dungeons just because I didn't want to bother queuing up with people and I didn't want to be rushed through the dungeon and I didn't want to have to... not know how to do it from the get-go and everything. And I think that's a big part of the reason that it's a big point as to why it's being popularized right now. Even World of Warcraft is adding in the ability to do regular level dungeons with NPCs. And it's just because that most people want to play by themselves. I love an MMO. I love a game that's going to last for a really long time. I like the ability to play with other people at any point in time. But most of the time when I play games, I'm playing by myself.
Discussion. I mean, just look at all the videos about it already made. Luckily for you, I'm also going to make a video.
Thank goodness,
about
dude.
It.
I appreciate you.
In the recent past, we've seen tons of solo-oriented game modes added to MMORPGs, usually called solo self-found modes, where you can't group with people, you can't trade with people, you have to earn everything yourself. RuneScape.
And I think that's fine. Well, the reason that's happened is really because of the buying gold epidemic. In one of my older videos, I talked about how RuneScape isn't a pay-to-win game, and a lot of people had some issues with that because they said, oh, you can buy gold in old school RuneScape. You can buy gold. Yeah, you can buy gold. You can't buy all of the items that people want, though. I mean, you can get in-game gear, but that doesn't give you a fire cape. You still have to learn how to prayer flick. You still have to learn how to do quests and unlock content. Yes, getting better gear does give you an edge, but 12 mil for the... How much does a bond cost? Is it $7? Is it $8? How much is it? How much ever isn't exactly a good deal on gold. I mean, if you want to frivolously spend your money like that, go right ahead. But you're still not going to max out your skills by just having a bunch of extra money lay around. I don't think you see a lot of people who are actually really good at the game. You can just inspect them and you can see how many bosses they've killed. If you inspect me, I have like 98 Scurrilous kills and 1 Jad kill, and that's all of the bosses that I've killed. You know that I'm not an amazing player. Even if I was walking around with a Grazi Rapier and a Full Justiciar set, you would know that I wasn't a super high-end ultimate tier player. It's easy to tell. Now, Iron Man mode, I do get that is a way of fixing that problem, and a lot of people are doing that in World of Warcraft and things as well, where they're playing in a way to where they're not trading with anybody. They have to get everything themselves, all of that stuff. And I appreciate that, but I think that you don't have to do all. You could just not buy the gold, and you could just try to find people who don't buy the gold. I mean, you can also do that, but who wants to talk to people?
Mode because that's cooler. And while these solo
I talk to
challenge
myself
modes
a lot,
are
you know?
relatively new thing, solo play in an MMO kind of isn't. In the days of early MMORPGs before World of Warcraft, MMOs were largely unsoloable. EverQuest was a notoriously difficult and punishing game that really required grouping to make it.
Yeah, you really kind of couldn't play MapleStory back in the day either, playing solo. I mean, you could, and a lot of people probably did, but in order to get the best rates, in order to level up quickly, I mean, party quests were the big thing that everybody did. And Monster Carnival and all those kinds of things. And that all required a group of friends, and it just wasn't a thing. And I do miss those times. I miss having friends who played MMOs and playing MMOs with them.
Any sort of meaningful progress. The same goes for games like Anarchy Online with its sandbox-style punishing open-world PvP system. If you tried to tackle that game alone, you'd probably just die instantly.
Sure.
But with the release of World of Warcraft in 2004, everything changed. You could make significant progress on your
By
character
yourself.
completely.
And a lot of people did. Now, in-game content, you had a lot of issues soloing. Obviously, you needed large groups in order to do it. There was no group finder, so you had to make friends and do that. But people progressed a lot of times by themselves, going through zones, doing quests, all of that. It was easier with a group for sure, because back then, I mean, early game bosses were a problem.
On your own. Almost every quest and early profession could be taken on without the help of anyone else, something the genre had never seen before. I mean, RuneScape existed since 2001 and was also a game that you could solo in a lot of ways, but people always seem to forget it, so I'm just gonna forget it too, I guess.
This is the thing that blows me away. Someone said the other day that RuneScape was a World of Warcraft clone, and I thought, dude, RuneScape 2 was out before World of Warcraft came out. I was playing that game when I was 6, 7 years old. I mean, this is not a WoW clone by any stretch of the imagination. Really, it's like a knockoff of Ultima or Mud.
World of Warcraft, whether the devs knew it or not, legitimized a valid way to experience MMORPGs that made the genre more accessible than it had ever been. So let me explain why lately
and it still wasn't super accessible. You still had to have a good computer. You still had to be able to pay $15 a month for the game. You still had to invest an insane amount of time. I have plenty of friends who tried World of Warcraft and couldn't make it past level 10 because it was just too much for their brains to handle. RPGs have always been kind of difficult and necessitate that you do a lot of trial and error. And there's a type of person, Tiff is one of those types of people, who if she has to do something over again, it irritates her like crazy. And if that happens too many times, she will just stop playing the game. And MMOs don't really appeal to her because of that reason. She hates the idea that everything isn't just capable to be done first go. And those people probably have more fun lives than we do, honestly. But I like the trial and error.
Very bad thing for these games.
It took me 9 tries to do the fight caves.
I want to make one thing clear, though. I love playing
9
solo.
hours.
I would say
That's
it's
not
the
even a long
primary way I experience MMORPGs.
Me too.
Solo players and solo content have a place in MMORPGs.
100% they do.
My issue is with the way devs are handling this content.
Yes, devs are now pushing more and more towards solo play. They know that people want to play that way, and now they're trying to eliminate the idea of in-game content that requires groups. And now that might sound really crazy, but you're not making friends in MMOs anymore. You're paying people for them to help you out to do things in MMOs nowadays, and that's a bummer. I miss the days of playing games where you legitimately wanted to play with the people you were playing with because you guys had a good time. But all the min-maxing and all that stuff that's going on, it really removes some of that and puts a barrier to entry to that. And here's the thing, is that there's such a small amount of cool people in the world. It's a fraction of society for sure. And if you're going to put more barriers to cool people being the people that you can play with, you're going to miss out on a lot of things.
Content. Either trying to outright stop people from playing solo or to cater to solo players a little too heavy-handedly. Both of these sides.
Yes, 100%. I think that both ways are wrong. I agree with that. I think that a game that's a primarily PvP-based MMO just sounds silly to me. I can't imagine how MMOs are ever going to be a competitive online PvP-based game. I don't think they're set up that way. I think that a game where you have to grind to get better gear in order to be competitive is a game that will never have a large enough player base. Well, that might not be true because of something like Rust, but in a game like an MMO where you have to spend 100+ hours just to get your gear set, and the gear keeps rolling forward, and you have to continually put in those 100+ hours, plus it's all PvP based, I think people will become frustrated with that most of the time, and it's been shown a lot. I don't think I'm saying anything crazy because we haven't had one that's popped off the way that other ones have. The majority of people who play games are casual gamers. That's what they do.
Lose sight of what makes solo play in an MMORPG great.
Yeah. I also think that solo MMOs are...
Sorry guys, this is the manifestation of my internalized anxiety. What are you doing here? Married? Oh, that's great. Cool. What's World of Warships?
Oh, here we go. Advertisement.
Sorry, not to cut you off, but I think it might be easier if you just possess my body and then speak through me. World of Warships is a free-to-play naval warfare simulation game available now on PC and consoles, and they're also the sponsor of today's video.
Little pitch down on a bus.
World of Warships right now at the link in the description.
Negative 30
and if you
dB,
use
something like that.
Bravo at registration, you'll get a huge starter pack full of.
Are games like this any good? Are games like World of Warships worth playing? All these games that sponsor videos.
Things like 500 doubloons.
I think people really like World of Warships, or at least they did.
7 days of premium account access and a free.
You can never
ship
tell if
once you
someone
complete
likes a
10
game
battles.
or not. They might play it nonstop all the time, and they might tell you they hate it.
Man, dude, that actually sounds really cool. How about I talk about the rest of World of Warships and you don't possess my body? It actually really scares me when you do that. Honestly, dude, the coolest thing I'm seeing about World of Warships is the new content released every single month.
That looks pretty cool.
That's wild. There's things like new ships, new cosmetics, and more, and it's all tied together with these state-of-the-art graphics
really good.
with dynamic weather, water textures that make the game look like the real deal.
Are these other players?
Oh, come on, man, don't possess me. Time to join the Discord and see what's going on in there. Dude.
I've joined Discords for a lot of games, and I almost always regret it.
When I ask you not to possess me, please don't possess me. Download World of Warships now at the link in the description, and don't forget to use code BRAVO to get all those free goodies I talked about earlier. Part 1. Why we play alone.
Sure.
It's important that we figure out why people even choose to play solo in the first place. It's a topic that to this day confuses Redditors and forum posters.
People have such an issue with this because they're called massively multiplayer online games, and why do you play them if you like to play solo? Because I like the systems in MMOs. They are unlike the systems in other games. They necessitate long grinds. They necessitate building a bond with the game and building a lot of knowledge about it. And when you beat the game, quote unquote, you're never going to, but when you do, it's not like there's no reason to play it again. There's a whole bunch of different ways that you can go through and you can interact with other people and you can have a totally new experience, and not just in the way that solo single-player games say that you can have a new experience. I get that in a game like Baldur's Gate 3, there's a ton of things to do. I get that people are having a really good time with it. I think I would like that game too, but it's not a game where I can go around and see other people doing things and see the way that they play it and make friends on the fly and go on missions with people. And it's not that kind of world. And I like to play mostly solo, yeah, but it is always a fun time when you meet somebody that you click with and then you start to play the game a little bit with them. That's fun. The completely interconnected world is what we always wanted in video games. I don't know if you guys remember back that far, but that we thought this was the future. We thought this is what everything was moving towards, and I didn't think it was going to be AAA, large cutscene, story-driven games. That's why I like MMOs to play single. I play mostly by myself when I play video games, and I like MMOs. It's not complicated.
And those are some of the smartest people in the world. Like I said before, this is a well-treaded topic on YouTube, but I keep coming back to this talk
Redditors
at GEC by prolific MMO game designer Damien Schubert. Damien's worked on games ranging from Meridian 59, the first ever 3D MMORPG. He's also worked on The Sims Online, which is one of the MMOs ever made. And at the time of the talk in 2011, he was the lead designer on Star Wars: The Old Republic.
Oh, cool. I've played Star Wars: The Old Republic.
Ever heard of it? You haven't? Oh, it's an MMO. Now Damien spends his time on Twitter complaining about protesters and giving his opinion on rap beef by saying, "You think Drake versus Kendrick is crazy? You should try listening to Fleetwood Mac."
Gee whiz, dude. In this now, there have been some incredible beefs in the non-rap world. If you know who Brand New is, and you know who Taking Back Sunday is, go back and listen to their first records. 70x7 is one of the greatest diss tracks of all time, and I don't even like Brand New very much.
Called The Loner, Damien talks about why and what types of people play alone in a genre that's greatest selling point is the multiplayer aspect. One really great point he touches on early is that the ability to be a loner is a uniquely MMO experience.
Totally.
The whole concept of a loner is predicated on the existence of other players.
Yep.
That in and of itself is a reason someone might want to play.
And And loners do a whole different thing in MMOs than people who play together do. I might be stepping on toes here, and but I want to preface this by saying that I don't mean anything negative towards you if this is how you play the game. That's totally your right, and you do whatever you want to do. But if you ever joined a guild and it's freaking weird, the people in there are like this weird pseudo-relationship conglomerate where they all pretend like they know each other and really want to get along, and they're all super agreeable and all that stuff. But meanwhile, they've only been in the guild for 4 or 5 days. That's the strangest thing in the world to me. How do you join a group of people where nobody is interacting with you and you conversate unless you're actively doing whatever they want to do? It's such a strange thing. You're not working together for anything except for raiding, which is usually a thing that only the select few who are way up there do, and blah, blah, blah. You got to pay money to do it, all this kind of stuff. It's such an odd pseudo relationship that they have. It gives me the heebie-jeebs, so I'm not a big fan of it. I like to play as a loner, and I like to meet other people who play as loners.
Play solo. It's like making an out-of-the-box build in an RPG and challenging yourself to complete the game. It's not a wrong way to play, it's a unique way to play, and it's a cool feeling even if you prefer playing alone to see other real people running around playing the same game as you. You can play solo and still feel like you're a part of the community. This type of player is one Damien describes as the soloer, a player who is either challenging themselves or just enjoys the MMORPG for what it is. They enjoy grinding and questing and leveling, and for them, participating in that experience with other players.
Figuring out the world, figuring out what's going on. A lot of people want to skip everything in an MMO and get right up until the end because they think that's where all the clout is, but I don't think there's any clout in video games. I don't think that being good at the video game gives you what you think it's going to give you. There are some people that it does, but you're probably not one of those people. If you understand statistics, whatever, and I know that most people don't do, if you understand statistics whatsoever, you know that the odds of you being the guy on Twitch who is the most popular WoW streamer because you're just the best at the game who's ever been is so low. Most likely it's somebody who's been playing for way longer than you'll ever be able to catch up to, or the most popular people on Twitch who play WoW are people like Asmon who just have really deep, intricate experiences with the game and understand it in a way that most people don't. And I think that's what's really, really beautiful. It's not about your skill level. It's not about how sweaty you are. It's not about how much DPS you do amongst your guild or whatever. It's about your relationship with the game and your relationship with your audience. That's where clout comes from when it comes to video games. And I don't even think it's really necessary to have. People have such a skewed vision of what's valuable in this world now, and it's because we're fed what I think of as a lie from so many people about what's valuable.
Isn't that important? This is just one of 10 types of loners Damien talks about in his talk, but if I went through all of them, I'd have to put Subway surfers on the screen to keep your attention, and I'm not willing to do that. Plus, some of the types of players he talks about are just like, I don't want to call them wrong, but they're just like, interesting. No, yeah. I'm not putting Subway Surfers back on the screen. So the first player Damien touches on is the new player. New players, I think, are the best example of a forgotten 100%. Type of solo players. These aren't people who are necessarily...
I heard someone say one time that there are no new people playing WoW. I'm a new person to WoW. I've only been playing, well, some people might not call me new anymore, but I started a couple years ago. I think that people are coming in all the time. I think that you inspect people in that game and you see what their achievements are, and they have less than 300 achievements all the time. I don't think it's the majority of players, but I think there is a trickle in of new players. I see people making videos about RuneScape where they're literally just saying, "Oh, I'm mining with my pickaxe and trying to get my pickaxe skill up, and I'm getting bronze." And I think that's a totally real thing that's happening, and people don't think about that. It's so bizarre the way when someone sees a new player, they don't want to play with them or teach them about the game. They want to give them a bunch of items that they don't know what they do and don't know how to use them well to get what they want in that game, and they try to then ship them off into just not bothering them. Most people who are really good at MMOs, and I'm not trying to be inflammatory here, it's just the truth, most people who are really good at MMOs want to stand in a popular location and flex all of the stuff that they've gotten over their time playing.
choosing to play solo, or they might not even be people who want to play solo. But when you start a new game, especially an MMO,
you don't know how to play
there's
it.
a lot going on and a lot to take in. If a game has the ability to be soloed,
and if you have any self-awareness, when you start playing a game and you're brand new to it, you feel kind of like a burden to other people. That's how it feels playing League of Legends. That's my biggest barrier to playing League of Legends, is I don't want to ruin other people's good time because I'm going to be a part of their team and I don't know what I'm doing. And that feels bad. So I spent a lot of time playing World of Warcraft by myself because I didn't want to bring down the rest of the team. I made sure that I knew how that game worked and I knew what the systems were and I knew what people were trying to do before I ever got involved in doing high-level content. Before I ever got involved in doing Mythic and Mythic Plus, I wanted to make sure that I had the foundation of the game down. But the problem is that people don't see any reason to make a friend with somebody who is just learning the basics of a game, probably because they don't think that you're going to stick around for very long. But we forget that the point of friends is not about what they can do for you. It's about the feeling that you get from camaraderie with somebody else and talking about things. You don't even have to talk about the game. Just getting on Discord with somebody and just idly conversating about whatever is something that makes a game a lot more fun. But man, I mean, honestly, people have lost the ability to do anything except for gloat about how good they are at things
early on so that new players can take their time, learn the abilities, feel out how the game mechanics
Nothing
work.
turns me off more than someone telling me how good they are at a video game. I just think, okay, dude, cool. Have you played these other video games? Are you also good at them? Do you do you have friends? It's like someone trying to get a girl by telling the girl how much money they make a year. It's cringe.
And all around get their feet under them, they'll be a lot more prepared and willing to do group content in the future. This comfort is also a lot more likely to retain players because while boring a new player is seen as the cardinal sin of game design, overwhelming them is just as bad.
Totally.
And other players are extremely overwhelming. The comments on the talk, which I think are super valuable in and of themselves, say as much. Other players, when you're trying to take your time and learn about the game or the lore, often just get in the way. Wait, did I just call a comment section valuable? That can't be right. Let me find one that's absolutely worthless. This guy...
People don't like when you're watching cutscenes because they want to get to the raid that they've done 30 times already and they're doing it for the 31st time, hoping for a drop. They don't want you to be watching the cutscenes.
I'm swallowing heavily in the microphone.
You're wasting their
is the thing
time.
I remember most of this conference. That's pretty worthless, but I mean, he has a point. Damien, drink some water.
Yeah, dude,
the last
for
type
real.
of person Damien identifies that I want to talk about is what he calls the lunch at your desk type. He just means grown-ups. Hey, Future Idol here. I'm being really mean to Damien right now. It's a good talk. I don't know why I was so rude to him. Over the years, the average MMO player has gotten older, which
MMOs as a game are not a game that appeal to young people as much. Young people want quick, fast, interesting. Quick and fast are the same freaking word. They want quick and interesting. They want it to be immediately rewarding to them. They want to jump in and they want to do the thing. They want to jump in and they want to be able to replicate the thing that they've seen more popular people than them do so they can feel like they're that person. It's a cosplay thing. I talk about this in other videos. And MMOs, I think, appeal to people like me who are a little bit older, have played a lot of video games in their life, and now they're looking for something that they can play for a very long time. Something that no matter how many times they come back to it, the complexity continues to increase. So we don't have to learn a brand new video game in order to have a good time. We can jump into a game that we've played a lot of. We already know how to do a bunch of things, so if we just want to enjoy what we already know how to do, that's on the table for us. If I want to go fight Scurrilous, I can do that. But if I want to go fight a new boss that I've never fought before, like, what's the big bear thing in the wilderness? I can't remember what his name is. If I want to go fight one of those, then that's a new challenge that I can take on and something new that I can learn about. That's what appeals to us because we might take long breaks from it. My life will get in my way a lot of times and I won't be able to play video games for a month or more at a time, but then I'll have these weird time periods where I can just play video games basically 8 hours a day for a month and a half straight. And during that time, I don't want to have to learn a brand new video game if I don't want to. So I like to come back to an MMO because it's never ending. There's constantly content being added to it, and it allows me to continue on a journey that I started a long time ago. Young people don't really feel that way because in their mind, this is all they have is right now. Young people don't observe the future the same way that old people do because we've lived through more time. When you're 30 years old, you can imagine that you can live for another 30 years. When you're 16, it feels like you've only been alive for 4 years because you've only gotten any kind of freedom by the time you're a teenager, maybe. And so it feels like this is all you have. You can't imagine being 30 or what that's going to be like. You imagine that at 21, your life's over and you're working some desk job and you're like married and having kids or whatever. So they don't want to play a game that might take them years and years to catch up on. They want to play a game where they can dominate right now. And I respect that and understand that, but that is what's going on.
Despite sounding like a stupidly obvious statement, is also true. Like back in the day, there were a bunch of teenagers and people in their early 20s and literal children running around these games.
Yeah.
But today,
well, that's because they were the game of the time too, by the way. Let's not forget that. Back in the day, MMOs were the new hotness. And it wasn't, what else were we going to be playing? Kingdom Hearts or Call to Arms or Medal of Honor or something? I mean, video games were a different landscape back then.
You're not going to find very many children at all on MMORPGs. That's why the mind.
And thank goodness for that, by the way. I don't want to play with young people. No offense to young people. I'm glad that you guys are alive and you're bringing up the new generation. I hope you do cool things in your lifetime, but I don't want to play with young people. I want to play with people who are like me. I don't like kids. I don't want kids. I don't get along with kids. They have a different mindset than me. They think everyone's there to entertain them.
Minecraft YouTubers won't log on. The average MMO player today is much more likely to be a 30-year-old with a full-time job and potentially even a kid or two. And when you have that much real-world responsibility filling up your schedule, it can be hard to find an uninterrupted 2 or 3 hours to do a raid or a group questing session. I mean, hell, it could even be hard to find a 45-minute period to do a dungeon run. And even if these types of players do,
that's why a lot of these games have dailies nowadays, because you can log in for a few minutes a day and you can do the dailies and get a decent reward for it.
Like 3 hours to play the game uninterrupted.
And if you notice, a lot of times dailies have rewards that last for a long time. You'll get EXP boosts or something, and those will have a month and a half expiration date on them because they want you to be able to get on when you can and get the most out of your time to try to catch up to people who have more free time than you.
Their social battery might be so drained that they really value the time to just play on their own.
Yeah.
Grown-ups are busy people, and they're also just all around worse. Like the All Grown Up TV show. It was worse than Rugrats.
I don't have any memory of a single Rugrats episode or a single All Grown Up episode, even though I watched both of them a lot as a child. I don't have any memories really from being a kid. I feel like all my memories start at 18 years old now.
That's like the whole point. That's the video I said. There are obviously a ton of other reasons someone might prefer to or even need to play solo in an MMO, and Damien's talk does a good job of touching on a lot of those, so I'd highly recommend watching it.
Sure.
I just felt the need to add this section to defend people like me who get told we're a paradox for playing an MMO mostly or entirely alone. But if I'm saying all of this to support solo style play, what's with the title of the video? Well, that's because of the thing that's about to pop up on the screen. Part 2, fixing I can't do an accent. As I've said multiple times in this video, the persistent multiplayer worlds of MMORPGs are their most unique and greatest selling point.
Yeah.
There's a very good reason for MMOs to try their best to
It is cool to know where Lumbridge is. It is cool to be able to draw a map of what RuneScape looks like. That is a good feeling. I like that I know where everything is. I know how to get around. I know how to do all of that. Seasons change in other video games, and the whole world changes along with it, and I'm not a big fan of that. Like I said, I don't want to have to learn a new game if I don't have to.
steer into group content. The content that takes up the most design, development, and QA time in any MMO is multiplayer content.
Totally.
I'm sorry, I couldn't keep a
DPS.
straight face saying QA. I know these guys aren't testing their games. Raids, dungeons, elite quests, or heroic quests, or whatever you want to call your special quests, fates, etc. Tons of examples of content that require or strongly encourage having a group. And
I had to play some other classes in Final Fantasy 14. I rolled a paladin as my main class. I'm not maxed out in that game or anything. I beat Heaven's Word and I'm into the next one, and I've just been taking a long break from it. I'm playing it mostly on PlayStation. But I think that I would much more enjoy a DPS class. There's just no DPS classes that look cool to me. I don't want to be a samurai. I don't want to be a ninja. I don't want to be a monk. I want dude with sword who does damage, but not in the weeb samurai way. I want big sword. I wish Dark Knight. If Dark Knight could have been a DPS class, I would have been stoked.
This content is seen as the highlight of the game by the community that plays it. Multiplayer content also has the added benefit of being one of the best ways to convert casual players into hardcore players.
Totally.
This is something else that Damien brings up in his...
You get a damage meter and all of a sudden you care about a lot of things that you did not care about before. Nothing feels worse than being out damaged by the tanks and the healers too. That's one of the worst feelings.
DDC talk. Every player starts off as a casual player, but over time and at their own pace, if everything goes well, they'll drift closer and closer to being a hardcore player. And the goal for every MMO is to get casual players to being hardcore players.
I'm committed in most of the games that I play at this point. I'm committed to RuneScape. I'm committed to getting all 99s in that game at some point. I'm committed in World of Warcraft. I will play the next expansion. I will do the raids. I will get my item level within 20 levels of the max item level. I will do those things. I'm not going to sweat, and I'm not going to lead a guild, and I'm not going to schedule in a Discord and all of that, but I'm committed.
Multiplayer content being the best way to create hardcore players isn't really surprising. When you look at a ton of endgame content, which tends to be the multiplayer content, it all lives down here on the spectrum. And if you do enough multiplayer content, you'll start to form social bonds with other players.
Totally.
And there's no better way to get...
Especially if you have a guild that you're doing it with regularly. Now, if you're doing, if you're just pugging, then you're probably not going to form these social bonds. Although I've made quite a few friends from pugging, the amount of times that I just have a question because I found some weird item on the wiki that I want. Here's a really good example. When you're playing a warlock in World of Warcraft and you discover that there's a way to get green fire, and then you ask someone, well, how do I get to is it the Isle of Storms or whatever? How do I get to the Isle of Storms just in a raid randomly? And some dude says, I'll take you there after this. And then that's how you make a friend.
People connected to a game than for them to have actual relationships formed through that game. I'm sure we all have friends that we met on our favorite MMORPGs
100%.
from our childhood that we either still talk to or at the very least still think about every...
The majority of my friends in real life that I have had for more than 10 years, I at some point played some MMO with. That's an insane thing to say out loud, but it is true. Even Jacob, he and I played RuneScape together. He never liked RuneScape, but we played it together, and we played a lot of MMO-type games together. I have another friend named Jacob Roberts, who also, the whole reason that he and I had any kind of bond is because we both loved MMOs. We played a lot of MapleStory together back in the day.
So often. I'd like to quickly apologize also.
And Mabinogi. Oh my goodness, Mabinogi was one of the greatest social experiences I've had in my entire life. Never have I felt like more people knew who I was and were happy to have me around than playing Mabinogi. I wish that game was still what it was back in the day for me.
You're an active MMO player, I did not mean to put you on a second spectrum. Anyway, game designers really want to make sure they can get as many people to this multiplayer content as possible, and that means they have to fix solo players. I mean, these players aren't doing dungeons, they're not raiding, they haven't joined a guild, they didn't even join the server's Discord channels to say a slur. Are they even playing an MMO? To fix
gamer words, baby.
These players, MMOs will sometimes create roadblocks in main story.
Comment. No, never mind. I was going to say comment your favorite slur down below. Don't do that, actually. That's not good. We shouldn't do that.
Lines or character progression that cannot be advanced unless you participate in a group activity. Diablo Immortal does this by having literal dungeons that you need to be in a group in, and they are required for the main story. And don't tell me Diablo Immortal's not an MMORPG, because Blizzard can't seem to figure out that Diablo was never meant to be one, even though they keep treating it like one. Like, why was Diablo 3 always online?
I think it's interesting that Diablo 4 is sort of MMO-like. I got in a lot of trouble because I said that Guild Wars wasn't an MMO, but in my brain, if the bulk of the game doesn't take place in a world that isn't instanced, the game isn't an MMO. And to my understanding, as someone who's played just a little bit of that game, the towns and a lot of events are MMO based. Sorry. Being that most people on the server can be there and you can see them, but the questing outside of that, you can only take the people who are in your group with you, right? It's all instanced when you go out into the world to do your quests, right? I just don't see that as being an MMO. I know that it has a large economy, but in my mind, an MMO is predicated by the idea that the majority of the gameplay takes place in a world where other people who you do not know just show up and come through. That's what an MMO is. Massively multiplayer. It's not just you and a few friends doing something. It's a whole world around you. And that's my thing with Diablo 4. Yes, you're in different servers. Same thing with Fallout 76. They're not MMOs in my brain because the server size is too small. It's not massively multiplayer. It's just multiplayer. If Fallout 76 is an MMO, I think that we have to call Battlefield an MMO because you can have 100 people in Battlefield or whatever, right? Is that an MMO now all of a sudden? Maybe I'm wrong on this, but this has always been the way that I've thought about it. I have to be grinding a mob and some dude has to come by and chaos me. That's in my brain what an MMO is.
Why is Diablo 4 just a lightweight MMO? They're not MMOs. Stop it. Sorry, this isn't supposed to be a video essay about Diablo, unless you'd want me to do that.
Yeah, dude, let's talk about Diablo 4.
Like Final Fantasy 14.
I cannot get someone to play Diablo 4 with me, and I do not want to play it alone. It doesn't look good enough for me to play it alone, but it looks like it would be a lot of fun with one or two other people.
Dungeons force some degree of multiplayer on you. The problem with this design paradigm isn't even that it gets in the way of solo players' experience, forcing them to do something they don't want to do. It's that it doesn't even accomplish the goal these devs are hoping it does. Social bonds are a fast track to creating hardcore players, but throwing players together in a dungeon that uses a group finder tool anyway so they can clear it super fast without ever saying a word to each other is not social.
No, it's not at all. And that's how most people are going to do this content. And I think that needs to be there. I don't have an answer for this. This is the most difficult problem that we face in MMOs nowadays, is that you have to have that ability to just plug into a group and run through it and do it really quickly, because that's what most people have the time for. And your player base is going to drop considerably if you don't have that. But in order for people to commit to MMOs, they have to feel like there's a reason for them to log in regularly. People need to make friends. People need to enjoy what they're doing. And if they can't do that, then you're going to have problems growing the player base. That was the thing about Mabinogi back in the day, is that there was so much content that you needed to do with a group. And so guilds were so necessary. And one person who was really good at the game could show you so much about how to be good at the game.
An article from Andy McAdams back in 2020 says as much, but in more detail and better written, despite the fact that he uses the dictionary defines social as line, which is not great, Andy, let's be honest. Andy does do a great job of diving into how social bonds are formed and what makes them meaningful, and comes to the conclusion that you very rarely meet a new friend because you were forced to group with them on a project.
Straight up.
These changes all attempt to fix a type of player that isn't broken.
No.
Some players just want to play solo. Others will seek out the multiplayer content if you did a good job designing it and designing meaningful but not forceful incentives to participate in it. Forcing them to change how they play the game isn't converting them into a hardcore player. It's converting them into a different game. I'm not trying to say there shouldn't be efforts made to break solo players out of their shell, but forcing them.
And this is that thing, right? This is that thing that we talk about all the time about introverts and extroverts. And introverts always say, well, why do they want to fix me? I'm just introverted. And I totally get that. I'm an introvert by nature. I don't like to be forced into things that I don't want to do. I don't want someone calling me every single day of my life, checking up on me. I want to be able to do what I want to do when I want to do it. I understand. But a lot of these games, your introversion is an effect of you feeling like you're going to be a problem for somebody else. It's not that you want to play alone, it's that you're too afraid to reach out. And it would be nice if there was a better way to make friends in MMOs. We need some kind of new AI software for making friends. That would be helpful, I think.
Them into group content is just not the way to do that. And hey,
this is the thing. And two, I let me tell you, if you're someone who's afraid of speaking in a video game, if you're somebody who's afraid of making new friends, if you're somebody who feels that you're introverted and that it's a problem for you, you wish you had closer relationships. Some people don't feel this way, and to those people, keep doing what you're doing. But to these other people, what I would say to you is just say the weird thing. Just say the thing that comes into your brain. Type it out in chat. If it's goofy, if it's dumb, and they don't respond to it, dude, just keep moving. It doesn't matter. No one cares. No one's going to think about you tomorrow. But maybe somebody will think you're funny. I've had people literally rolling on the ground laughing about random shit that I've said in raids before. I was playing Final Fantasy 14 with some new people one time, and and we were in a raid, and I was playing a tank. And I had been talking about how I've never main tanked before. I don't even understand what the concept is. And at one point, I was the one who pulled the aggro onto me, and I was main tanking. And I was just going, I'm doing it. And it made friends, dude. Just say, be yourself. Be goofy, be fun, be enjoyable. Don't try to be an anime character who has a dark, brooding past. Now, maybe that's who you actually are. And if that's who you are, then more power to you. Godspeed. Hopefully we can be friends one day. I'd love to hang out with you. But be yourself. Don't worry about being cool. Don't worry about being interesting. Just say the thing. Just say the thing that comes into your brain. It's that easy.
I see you other MMOs who are bragging about catering to solo players with their content updates. You think you're off the hook on this one, right?
No.
You think so? Oh, gosh. Part 3, fixing solo play. Because part 2 was fixing solo players, so this is the same, but different. It's like a theme.
I get it, dude.
Solo
Come on.
players don't need to be fixed. There's nothing wrong with us. But you know what else doesn't need to be fixed? Solo play.
Yeah.
Some MMOs have correctly identified that a strong solo.
Keep the MMO the way it is and add new content that builds off of that game. Doesn't dramatically change it. If your product is popular, it does not need to be fixed. I do not need solo-only content. I want an MMO that I play solo.
Player base is almost as, if not just as important as a strong social player base. For that reason, they've made sure to cater new updates to solo players either exclusively or in addition to the standard multiplayer crowd. This is a great thing to do if you're planning a new leveling zone or continent or quest line. Having interesting multiplayer content but making sure there's plenty to do as a solo player as well is great game design that has been done for decades in the genre at this point.
Sure.
The problem comes up when the line blurs between multiplayer and solo content. The best example of this.
Don't take multiplayer content and make it super solo accessible. Do not allow me, and I might be in the minority here, but do not allow me to get the best gear in the game through playing exclusively solo if your game is MMO based. Allow me to get the gear that puts me into a competitive range for the multiplayer content by playing solo.
This, in my opinion, is old school RuneScape. Back in 2017, old school RuneScape got a new piece of content called Raids, and it was touted as the first ever piece of content that really required other players to get best in slot loot. I mean that with all due respect to the Cowfight Queen and to the King Black Dragon. By 2017, they were both soloable and also irrelevant. Eventually, players did find out how to solo this raid, and it's now a very popular thing to do.
And props on that. That is cool. If by improving my skill level an insane amount, I can solo a raid, that is incredible. That's in plenty of games, and I'm cool with that. But just don't dumb it down and give me the same rewards that you're giving to the people who are actually doing it the way that it was designed for. That's not good. That ruins other people's achievement.
to do.
I don't want you to cater to me because I feel left out. I'll figure it out. I will. I'll make friends if I have to.
Some time, and it's still
I'll be angry the whole time, and I'll be like, damn, dude, I wish this girl wouldn't talk about his body pillow. I wish this guy wouldn't talk about his body pillow collection, but I guess I have to put up with them. I'll do that.
Instantly difficult. But with the next
You make those numbers big enough as the reward for putting up with the body pillow guy, I'll hang out with body pillow guy.
The Theater of Blood, the old school RuneScape team really set out to make the hardest raid yet, and also one that would not be soloable. And while Theater of Blood has been soloed before, it's very, very few players who have ever done it.
Wash your body pillow, by the way. If you're that guy who your body pillow is stiff, wash it.
Requires a ton of skill and time. Theater of Blood stands as the only piece of content that you're really gonna need to group up with other players to do if you want the loot from it. But with the third raid is when we got an interesting design shift from Jagex, the creators of old school RuneScape. This third raid, called Tombs of a Masket, featured variable difficulty through the invocation system, meaning you could choose what mechanics bosses did and didn't have.
That's really cool. I do like TOA for that reason, because you can learn TOA on your own, but you don't get the best gear from it, or at least you have a significantly reduced drop rate for the best gear from it. It starts removing items from the loot list, and that's really cool because I want to be able to learn the raid before I do it with other people, once again, because I don't want to waste their time.
As hard as you wanted to make it. Obviously, this comes with changes in how common loot drops are and what the best drops you can get are. But something else they did that I thought was really weird is that they actually put design considerations in the raid for if you entered solo. Things like making certain rooms just faster to complete if you're alone.
That's cool.
So the variable difficulty combined with these design considerations means that solo was and is a completely viable way to do this raid, and in some cases it can even be optimal. Is it really the end of the world to have a solo option for a piece of content like this? No. Not really, but I do think it adds a lot to an MMORPG to have parts that are designed specifically and exclusively for groups.
Multiplayers,
Some of you might be thinking that locking the best items behind group content is an example of forced multiplayer, like I talked about in part 2, but I don't think it is.
No.
In vanilla
It's
World
a
of Warcraft,
reward.
you can level from 1 to...
You don't need everything that is in the game if you don't want to do everything that is in the game. That should be a really obvious thing to people. If you don't work the job, you don't get the paycheck. And that's the trade-off that you have to choose between. That's what life is. If you just make an easier way to get the reward, people will do the easier way. That's what human brains do. Path of least resistance.
60 completely on your own, comfortably, and have a great time doing it.
Yeah.
Along the way, though, with the elite quests and dungeons you'd have skipped, you'd be missing out on some of the best
Really cool
gear in the game
and really
for
cool
leveling.
lines.
The difference there is that solo play is viable, but it's not optimal.
No.
Content that can be soloed.
We could talk forever about how optimal is a thing that people have built up in their brain as being unbelievably important. And once again, that's people who don't understand statistics. 95% for 70% less effort is a really good trade most of the time, unless that 5% is really important to you, and to some people it is, and to you people, Godspeed. Do the thing that I wish that I had it inside of me to do. But for me, 95% for 70% less effort is perfectly fine.
It exists throughout the game, but having group content that is extremely worth doing but not strictly speaking required is a really good thing. Like I said already, I'm a solo player, and when it came time to do my first Dead Mines in World of Warcraft Classic, I was dreading it. Yeah. I hate talking to other people, and I especially hate letting those people down and having them flame me in chat. I don't know 100%. Why, but it scares me. But I really want to...
I feel the exact same way. I don't know what it is. It's some kind of people-pleasing thing, probably, but a lot of times there's a lot of pressure put onto you by these games to make sure that you are not the person who's letting everyone down.
The Cruel Bard from Edwin Van Cleef. And
I will never play with a streamer on a video game because I don't want to be the person that they're why were you standing in the fire? I'm going to kick you from this raid. I don't want to be that guy.
I especially wanted the Tunic of Westfall from the quest line that ended in the Dead Mines. And if I really wanted that stuff, I had to just bite the bullet and put myself in a social situation.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening is I had a ton of fun.
Yeah.
A lot of that fun came from the fact that we had to organize our group through an actual chat system, meaning we had to actually send at least one message to each other. And once you
this is another thing, another tip that I would say to people who are introverted and have a really hard time socializing, come up with a few good things to say for lots of different situations and set them to macros. And then use those macros to quickly get off something fun situationally that will show other people what your personality is like.
send one message, it gets a lot easier to send a bunch more. So you start joking around with these people, or one of them turns out.
I once played a Final Fantasy XIV match with somebody who, when someone would die, they would say something along the lines of, "I told you to slay, not be slain," and that was a really fun way to see who they were.
That's fun. I have had some bad experiences in dungeons, but also a lot of my favorite experiences are from grouping up with other people.
Yeah, I've had some terrible experiences in League as well. I've had people blame me for the fact that we're losing because I'm playing jungle and I only have 7 kills and they all have 3 kills each, and I should have carried harder or whatever. They think that I should have been a better jungler. I've had people tell me that I'm the problem when we're all doing poorly and we're just getting slaughtered and we're hanging in there forever. That definitely happens, but you also have some really incredible moments where you all know that you're the team that's going to win and you feel really good about it, and you all fame the guy who was the one that did the best. It's a great feeling.
People
Camaraderie.
for these dungeons, or for the quests, or for even raids. It's the one time I get to experience the truly exclusive thing an MMORPG can offer me. And all that happened not because I was forced to do it, but because I was sufficiently tempted by good design to do it. I still, to this day, play World of Warcraft primarily solo. It's how I like to level.
Me too.
But I really love getting the chance.
I'll do dungeons when it's optimal, and then I switch to leveling solo a lot of times in zones. What's the zone? Whatever. I'll go to Warlords of Draenor, and I'll do that after I'm level 40 or whatever. That's how I like to level in that game.
To break that up with some group content that just feels good and feels natural. So the question becomes, how do we get more of that? Part 4. We literally already figured that out. It's like, what are you doing here, guys? Making solo play fun without making it required or hindering the multiplayer aspect of MMO.
Temptation. It needs to tempt you. It needs to be good enough, and the rewards need to be good enough that you want to do group play, while also not making it impossible for you to get into group play unless you are already doing a ton of group play or spending a whole bunch of money on the game to get better items by buying gold and paying people to carry you and all that kind of stuff. You need to be able to have a pipeline from a solo player's experience directly into a multiplayer experience, and I think that WoW has really touched on that a lot in this season, especially where you can get the bullions and you can buy really good items, and there's increased drop rates and all of these new mechanics that are allowing you to get better and better gear so you can do harder and harder content, because a lot of times it's not even your gear that's the problem, it's the skill level at that point. But you don't want it to also be a gear problem. You don't want to have to spend money just to get gear so that then you can go and learn how to do things.
MMOs is a solved problem. RuneScape solved it. Guild Wars 2 solved it. World of Warcraft solved it.
Totally.
For some reason, these games, old and new, are now trying to force themselves to either be entirely soloable or entirely multiplayer.
Don't need it.
Solo and multiplayer are not at odds with each other. They're not harming each other. They can and have existed in MMOs for
They're two
decades.
sides of the same coin.
Devs should absolutely continue to consider solo players when designing new content, but they should also remember when multiplayer content fits in best. They're designing an MMO. You'd be stupid to ignore the M. The analogy I made before about making a...
So this is the weird thing. I talked a little bit about this earlier, and let's touch on it again real quick before this video is over and I have to make final thoughts. I think it's a really bad idea to make a game that says, this game is going to be a hardcore PvP MMO, and you're going to die and lose everything, and that's just how it is. Because what I think is happening is that game is coming from a place of negativity. It is coming from a place of all these other casual losers are the problem, and we're making it for just us super cool hardcore players. And I think that that's a way for you to not be able to sustain a long-term video game, and MMOs by nature have got to be a long-term process. People, when they play an MMO, want to play a game that will be around for a very long time because you're going to invest an insane amount of hours into it. And if one day that game goes away, it will really, really, really negatively affect your desire to ever do that again.
Bad build in an RPG is exactly how solo play should be viewed. A bad build doesn't need to be balanced and made as good as all the other builds in the game. What's important is that a player who chooses a suboptimal build can enjoy the game and even get to the end of it, even if that means they'll do it slowly. As long as it's fun, it's okay. So for the love of God, stop forcing me to play in a group to advance your main storyline. I'll group if I want to, or if you've tempted me enough. Until then, I'm just gonna blast the Sonic Frontier soundtrack and kill 25 goblins like a good little...
I watch YouTube videos while I play video games. A lot of times. I beat the fight caves while I was listening to a Steak and Eggs podcast. I like to consume multiple things at one time because it makes it easier for me to focus when I don't feel like there's something else I should be doing because I'm already doing something else.
Little gamer boy. Thank you again to World of Warships for sponsoring this video.
It was a good video. I like Ideal a lot. I think that in general, if you play solo, this weird thing that people do where they're constantly being like, why are you doing that? Dude, why are you doing that? Why are you over here blowing the guild leader to try to make him like you more so that you can get taken on more raids to get your gear levels up so that you can ascend to some tier? There's no bitches and money, dude. Play the game. Enjoy your life. Stop worrying about all this other stuff and just play the game. That's all it comes down to. Give the video a like and a sub. If you enjoyed it. Ideal's a cool guy. He deserves it.